This is the tier list that matters. It is indeed. We are going to be ranking all of the DPS specs against each other based on fun. We're going to be ranking which are the most fun specs in Season 3 and which are the not so fun specs. Okay, first up then, we have the Frost Death Knight. Now, I am pretty certain in the fact that this is the most improved spec coming into Season 3. There are some close contenders, but in terms of fun, Frost DK has to be up there. I am loving the fact that Frost Scythe is now your AoE rune spender. This is just like everything the spec was meant to be, right? It should have been this way for a long time, but having Frost Scythe as your AoE spender fits the spec perfectly in terms of like thematics, and then you're pressing Glacial Advance as your AoE spender. Frost Strike is still not the most fun runic power spender in the game, or for the spec, but nevertheless, you're only really pressing that on single target, right? Other than that, you're pressing your Obliterate and your Frost Scythe for your runes, and then your Glacial Advance to do that big fatty dam in AoE. Super duper fun. Frost Scythe being your AoE spender also now means that Death and Decay is gone. Thank the frickin' heavens, hey? This ability has been plaguing the spec and basically the whole of the Death Knight class for as long as we can remember, and there have been so many people that have just never even bothered to touch this spec because you were so tied to your Death and Decay windows, which just felt awful. So thank God that is gone. That alone, that change alone is enough to make this spec just like insanely more fun. They also reworked, they've reworked the whole thing, right? So you've got Empowered Rune Weapon now, which it definitely takes time to get used to. It doesn't really feel like a cooldown, but it does really smooth out your gameplay. So that is super nice and makes the gameplay feel much more fluid, and also allows for some skill expression in there as well. Remorseless Winter got baked into Pillar of Frost, so that's making your Pillar of Frost feel much more impactful of a button press. I never really cared to press Remorseless Winter as it was anyway, because it was kind of just like a button you'd press and forget about, right? There was ways to like min-max it and keep your stacks high, but I am much bigger of a fan of just having Remorseless Winter baked into something else. It makes the opener more fluid as well. Then the last big changes that the spec got is the huge breath changes. So breath is now extended by your Killing Machine procs and your Rhyme procs, which you're getting much more frequently. This also plays super nicely because during your breath windows, you're hopefully going to be in your Pillar of Frost windows. And now that your breath isn't consuming runic power anymore, you're actually able to spend your runic power with Glacial Advance or maybe even a Frost Strike on single target, which with your Obliteration talent is then going to guarantee you Killing Machine, which is then going to extend that breath, and it all just plays into each other very, very nicely. So huge dub for breath being extended by your Killing Machine procs and Rhyme procs. You're getting Rhyme a lot more now as well, and Rhyme procs are also reducing the cooldown of that Empowered Rune Weapon. So the spec is just like flowing super nicely, and it's all kind of playing into each other. So for me, Frost DK is going straight in that S tier. So next up we have Unholy Death Knight. So this was reworked, but it doesn't really feel like it was reworked, okay? So I've been playing a lot more of the Commander of the Dead build recently, which I am actually loving, to be fair. It's a very simple build. I think a lot of people think Unholy is like a more difficult spec, but it's a simple build, and I love the idea of summoning all of these extra Maguses through your Sudden Dooms, your Apocalypse and Dark Transformation cooldown that are now baked into each other. But they're summoning these Maguses that are now cleaving these Shadow Bolt volleys on up to 8 targets, bridging that gap for Unholy in those lower target cleave scenarios. But just firing out these AoE Shadow Bolts, it's so freaking sick. I'm playing an Unholy DK to feel like a Necromancer, right? And this just ties into that fantasy like perfectly. The one thing that I don't feel ties into that necromantic gameplay is your Legion. Is it Legion of Souls? Yeah, Legion of Souls. So it's a new choice node where you can choose between this, which is basically just an excuse to keep the icon and animation of A-Bomb Limb in the game. You can pick between Legion of Souls, which applies loads of wounds, blah blah blah, super boring, like set and forget, minute-and-a-half cooldown, or you can choose to raise Abomination. Legion of Souls is currently outperforming the Abomination in AoE, which is like obviously going to be your bread and butter for dungeons. So unfortunately, the necromantic feel is kind of being hindered by the fact that we want to be playing Legion of Souls instead. We don't. We want to be playing Raise Abomination and summoning all of these ghouls, all of these undead minions, and also spreading disease and corruption. Like that's what you want to be feeling like when you're playing an Unholy Death Knight, right? Plaguebringer and Clawing Shadows being on different talents, they're no longer on a choice node anymore. That's a huge dub and a nice step in the right direction, because you can now play Clawing Shadows, which basically makes you feel like sort of a hybrid melee. You can use your Epidemic and your Death Coils at range. You can now use your Clawing Shadows and also cleave your wounds at range as well. So if there's mechanics that are getting you out of melee, you've got that to combat it. I really like Clawing Shadows. Big fan of playing with this ability. So that's what I enjoy about the Unholy Death Knight from the rework so far. The thing that I'm not sold on is Desecrate. This new talent definitely feels odd. Basically what this does is it applies or bursts active wounds that are on all of the mobs that you're fighting, right? So you set down your Death and Decay, then it turns to Desecrate. You use that and it will apply or burst wounds. Now this does free up movement because it's still giving you that like full duration of your Death and Decay window where you're going to be cleaving your Scourge Strikes or Clawing Shadows. But it makes this Death and Decay and Desecrate button feel more like just another wound button, as opposed to like you're pressing it to activate your cleaving Scourge Strikes, right? So not sure how I feel about that. Also, all of this extra wound generation means that you're now having to overcap on a lot of runic power. You're basically only really pressing Epidemic and maybe Death Coil if you don't have wounds to pop, right? Not a fan of it. Don't get me wrong, I'd always rather be popping wounds, like that chunk, that like audio effect you get when you're popping multiple wounds at once. Mwah, chef's kiss. But I also don't want to feel like I'm ever wasting anything in my rotation, right? So that just kind of feels outright bad that you're overcapping so much on runic power just because all you really care about is wounds. However, because of all these extra wounds and maybe even playing into this problem more, you'll get the amount of Festering Scythe procs that you now get is ridiculous. You're just always proccing this ability, and this is easily one of my favorite additions that Unholy Death Knight has had in recent iterations or additions. I love this ability, and now Festering Scythe also can be held for up to 30 seconds. So with good gameplay, you can take your Festering Scythe into the next pack to get everything wounded up, and then you can start cleaving them and popping them all for big AoE damn that we know the Unholy DK does so well. So, Unholy DK, super enjoying this spec. Definitely not as much as Frost, but I am having a good time on this spec. More so specifically the Commander of the Dead build, and I'm going to drop this into the A tier. Now, I mentioned that Frost DK was one of the most improved specs going into Season 3, and that is right alongside the Havoc Demon Hunter. Movement is finally gone. I mean, I have been corrected that apparently movement was not the play in Season 2 either, but this is kind of the first that I've seen of it, so just let me embrace the novelty, right? Yeah, I'm just in love with how this spec plays currently, and I hope that it stays like this so that we can show and prove to Blizzard that Havoc does not need movement, and we don't need to be zip-zapping around the encounter to have fun on this spec. It's fun enough, it's flashy enough, and it's procky enough by itself for us to just have a good time without having to think of our positioning so much, right? Speaking of procs, I never thought I would see the light. I never thought I'd see the day that I would say this, but I am actually in love with Aldrachi Reaver. Now, I do think that I would enjoy it more so if we did have the choice to like buff up our Chaos Strike as our last ability in the like the little sequence on like single target or for like prio damage. But the way that they've done this tier set basically means that whenever, so after you use a Reaver's Glaive, then you can either use your Blade Dance or your Chaos Strike first, and then that will buff up the other one even further. If you use Chaos Strike first and then Blade Dance, it does like an extra 6 slashes, but with the tier set, it's now doing 12 slashes. So every time you get a Reaver's Glaive proc and press this empowered Blade Dance, it literally feels like you're sending out, I don't know if it's the audio feedback, I don't know what it is, but it literally feels like you're sending out a Glaive Tempest every time you press this, and it's so frequent. For those of you that played Havoc and Legion, it literally feels like you're getting a Fury of the Illidari proc like every time you use this beefy Blade Dance. I love it. And yeah, if you get lucky with your Reaver's Glaive procs, like if you're consuming and going through a lot of souls, which is slightly RNG, then oh my god, this spec just feels disgusting. Like you're just constantly proccing these. Even just throwing the Reaver Glaive by itself feels like super impactful of a button press in itself. I do wish that the hunt was on a 1-minute cooldown. That would mean that it would line up, every other hunt would line up with your meta, so you'd have a guaranteed ReVG going into your meta. I think that would benefit the spec a lot. And also, in terms of cooldown reduction as well, I've been being on a 20-second cooldown. When you get to the 20-second cooldown buff through your Cycle of Hatred talent, it just needs to permanently be like that. I don't like, it's only really impactful for like the start of your key and maybe in the start of your boss fights as well. I don't really know how it works in raid. But I've been being on a 20-second cooldown, like the little gameplay loop of getting into your demonic window. Like it's all about being a demon, right? So the 20-second cooldown just feels perfect. That also lines up with every Vengeful Retreat. So that will amp up your damage because of the initiative. Don't really like initiative. I mean, I can handle it, and it's me being super nitpicky. Like, movement's gone, so listen, I can deal with a bit of Vengeful Retreating here and there. But I don't really like the fact that it is a damage amp. It does feel a lot better though, especially when playing Eldrazi Reaver, because you get a Fellblade reset, which means you can get straight back into the mixer. So I can't complain too much about that. And then lastly, the other proc that I thoroughly enjoy with this spec is your Immolation Aura resetting itself. So like if you're in AoE and you're just like constantly refunding your Immolation Aura, you know that you're building up this fatty rage fire, and you kind of just like watching the Immolation Aura tick down, ready for it to blow up for some big old AoE dam. So that is super fun. I am loving Havoc going into Season 3. So I'm also going to put, I think I'm actually going to put Havoc. Yeah, I prefer playing Havoc to Frost DK, so it's going at the top of S for me. I don't know if this is a hot take. I didn't actually realize how many people like the movement-based gameplay for Havoc, but you guys are freaks, and let us enjoy this season, okay? Right, so our first range spec of the fun tier list, we have the Balanced Druid. Now, Keeper of the Grove used to feel so good. Now, don't get me wrong, this was because of how powerful the tier set was. Basically, what the tier set does is it summons a Dryad that accumulates all of your, like, what am I trying to say? AoE pad damage during your cooldowns that Boomy's known for, right? It accumulates all of it, and then once it fades, you can then fire 2 Star Surges back to back that have accumulated all this damage and deal even more single target damage. So at the start of PTR, we were literally deleting like these big lieutenant mobs, right, by ourselves, because this also splashes AoE damage from the Star Surge, right? So it's giving Boomy priority damage, which in my opinion feels amazing for the spec, because I don't really enjoy just feeling like this AoE like pad monster, right? You always get memed on for it, so it's nice that you're kind of converting that into some useful damage as well. It's now doing a lot less damage, and this is not about damage, because it almost like it was fun to do that ridiculous damage, but it did feel like ridiculous, right? So, and we always knew it was getting nerfed, so it's more of a case of just like, I'm enjoying the fact that they've given Boomy some prio damage, because it never really had that before. And I enjoy using, like, spicing up my rotation a bit and using Star Surge in, like, AoE, right? Big fan of that. Also, you're getting priority damage from your Elun's Chosen tier set as well. I haven't actually got around to testing this, but basically you're just sending out these free Star Surges when you're star firing. These do cleave onto, like, 3 targets or 4 targets total, but I feel like the Star Surges are split off of the mob instead of being like coming out of you and like seeing like 3 or 4 Star Surges shoot away from you, right? I think that would look so unreal, but it doesn't seem to do that unless I'm just like blind. I don't know. But yeah, Boomy's getting a lot of prio damage going into Season 3, which is super nice. I'm still enjoying having 2 charges of Incarn. I was a bit iffy about this. I do still miss Pulsar, I think. But 2 charges of Incarn does work super nicely with, like, specifically the Keeper of the Grove tier set, because you're getting more of those buff Star Surges, and you can also line up your Treants inside of all of these Incarn windows. Your Treants are also applying Moonfires for you, which is making setup a lot easier. Dots aren't really so much of a thing for Boomy anymore, and it's just a nice quality of life that the Keeper of the Grove hero talents have. So definitely enjoying that. Outside of that, Balanced Druid is still very simplistic. I feel like it did lose a lot. It's like losing Pulsar, and I feel like it has lost a lot over the like previous changes to it. So I am going to put Balanced Druid in the B tier. It's still a fun spec. I do still enjoy it, and B tier is definitely a good place to be in terms of fun, but I do definitely enjoy these other specs more. I think Balance is just too simple for me now, because, like, you know, I'm like big brained in that. Feral feels pretty much the same. I don't think really anything changed for it, especially for Druid of the Claw. The tier set's pretty bland. You get an extra Ravage, but it doesn't really like do anything. You get a bit of haste. That's about it. Doesn't really feel that noticeable or impactful. It'd be more fun if you could like play around it, and like it kind of just like naturally happens where you buff up your dots by 30% because of your Ravage, right? It would be more fun if there was ways to like express skill. I don't really feel like Feral needs any more ways to express skill, but yeah, it just feels a bit bland. However, I do, because of that reason, I do wish Wildstalker was the play. I've tested a bit of Wildstalker on dummies, and my god, the amount of vines that you generate, which then basically it's like this mini game of biting these vines to do like big AoE damage when you get the bursting growth from the vines exploding when you bite into it. It's just that they're always proccing, so there's always something to bite. It feels so good, and you know that that's exploding for big AoE damage on top of your rampant ferocity damage from your ferocious bite cleaving as well. I wish that Wildstalker was the play, and it actually seemed to be doing some decent damage. So I don't know, maybe it will be, but I thoroughly enjoyed that mini game of Wildstalker Feral. I mean, it's super fun on Resto Druid as well. But yeah, not a lot has changed for Feral. I do wish that the Primal Wrath Bleed was a bit longer. This is obviously made even more of an issue by Circle of Life and Death. Rip does do a lot of damage, so I guess that's like, it kind of makes sense for your Primal Wrath duration to be that short, and you have to like kind of maintain it. But I just kind of wish that you were able to weave more bites in between that. I do enjoy this spec though. Rake spreading is fun. Only really though when you're playing double clawed Rake, and that is even more fun as Wildstalker because it means more vines. The blood talons and snapshotting with Tiger's Fury is super fun as well. It allows better players to like show off their skill, right? So I definitely do enjoy that as well. The only other thing that I don't like is sometimes, especially like when you've been going for a little while, energy regen definitely isn't the fastest with this spec. I don't know if this is maybe a skill issue, but I just think like in general, classes that rely on energy and that actually have to wait for their energy to pull up, and like with Feral, you have to wait for your energy to pull to get more damage out of your ferocious bites. Waiting around and pressing something in modern WoW is something that I feel like the majority of people can agree that we just don't want to be doing. So that does hurt the fun, but it's like, honestly, I do feel like it's improved a lot, and with more stats, more haste, that's always going to feel better. I'm going to put Feral in the A tier behind Unholy. It probably would be higher. Like if Wildstalker was to play, I think maybe I'd put it at the top of A tier. Augmentation Evoker and Devastation Evoker. Now, I haven't played any of this because my Evoker is level 72 or level 73, because Evoker is a cringe class and it should be deleted from the game. There's my rage bait. Aug is doing more of its own damage, which I don't really want to talk about damage, but I feel like this is relevant to Augmentation, right? Doing its own damage is definitely going to help the spec and also make people that don't enjoy the supporty style, i.e. myself, enjoy the spec a lot more. You're getting a shit ton of damage out of your Scale Commander tier set. Yeah, to be fair, that is actually sick. I have seen that. Now, obviously, like I said, I haven't played it myself, but I have actually seen you actually have like a little Drakthir army around you, right? That shoot out these pyres and also disintegrates. Like, in terms of class fantasy and thematics and also like being a Scale Commander, you can't really argue with that. Like, as much as I'm an Aug hater, that is pretty sick. It also makes your Breath of Eons feel even more impactful, right? I'm still not a fan of like it being a support spec, and it's a very simple spec. I don't think anyone can argue with that. I mean, people do enjoy the mini game, so it's difficult to rank because like I know that this isn't a spec for me, and like there's a few other specs like this. I do feel like Blizzard did the support style of a spec very well, and I do think that with the way that I can imagine to somebody that enjoys this type of playstyle that it is very fulfilling and satisfying to like buff up the rest of your party. And like I said, I think the way that they did the extension on like the ebb and might through your eruptions and also your empowered abilities, they did do a good job with it. So I don't want to be too harsh with Aug. I'm going to put it in the B tier. Okay, so moving on to Dev. Again, same boat as Aug. I haven't been able to play it on the PTR, but with help from chat and also seeing Aug and Dev being played, I feel like I can make a pretty valid guess as to how it would be feeling right now. Scale Commander, I would hope that it's the play for both of these specs because it does seem sick. Like, proccing this army for Dev and also having your Mass Disintegrate cleave on 2 more targets, that's got to be trucking. And even just firing out 3 disintegrate beams at once with the like original Mass Disintegrate, right? That looks unreal. But to now have that firing at 5 targets all at once, I assume that they can all proc Eternity Surges as well. That's unreal. Like, that sounds like a good time. Dev's fun. It's like, it's very bursty. It's simple, which to some people that's appealing. To other people like myself, I don't want a super complex spec, like that does put me off, but I do feel like it's just kind of higher on AoE, disintegrate on like single target or low cleave. I do really enjoy single target with Dev. It's a lot of disintegrate spam, but to me it just feels like satisfying. So I'm actually going to put Dev in at the top of B tier. Like I would enjoy the spec more than I would enjoy Boomy. The big thing that holds it back for me, which is kind of negated by movement a little bit, is your range. Blizzard, please just make these 40 yards, like 25 yards is not it. Okay, so apparently Scale Commander is just like dead on arrival for Dev, which is super sad to hear. Apparently the play is going to be Flame Shaper instead, which seems like there might be able to be a bit of like min-maxing around the tier set, especially the 2 set, with buffing your damage over time. But yeah, I mean, Engulf is a super fun ability to press, and it's going to make this button press feel even more impactful. But I just think Scale Commander is like, there's no arguments there. Scale Commander is just infinitely cooler. Yeah, so like I said, take it with a pinch of salt what I've said about these 2 specs, because I actually haven't been able to test them myself. And I do feel like I would really enjoy playing Dev. But this is more so from hearing opinions of other people, seeing it being played as well, and also getting feedback from the Twitch chat, twitch.tv, Vesperal TV. Why have I said that on the Evoker part? Like, nobody's reading or watching this part, right? So, back to some specs that I know my shit on, okay? We've got the Beast Mastery Hunter. Now, this tier set for Pack Leader is everything that Beast Mastery needed. Stampede goes brr. It did used to go more brr, but like I don't really care about the damage. Like this, again, is a fun tier list, right? But it's just exactly what BM needed, because BM, you feel so detached and uninvolved with like your rotation. Your pets are all in melee, like they're completely crowded by all of these different mobs, and also your team, and you're stood 40 yards away shooting your bow and pointing at your pets, right? We need some visual feedback for BM so that we actually feel like a part of the fight. And getting that from Pack Leader with the boar charging, the bear leaping in, the wyvern flying around you, and now also consistently summoning a stampede which runs from beside you through the mobs to deal fatty AoE damage, single target damage, is just like, it's perfect. I don't think I could have come up with anything better for this spec. And also, Blizzard, add this as a talent for BM after this tier set leaves. Not sure how I feel about Dire Beast now being passive. BM did not need to lose a rotational button. Like, it's already a meme how easy this spec is, right? And I feel like Dire Beast really kind of like fleshed out the rotation. Like, it gave you that button to press that kind of like, I don't want to say kept you on your toes, but it kept it feeling like fun, right? Because otherwise you're just pressing barb shot, multi-shot, and kill command. So I think I do miss pressing Dire Beast, but I do like the idea. I guess there is some min-maxing to be had here with like your Dire Beasts are now passive and they spawn from your bleeds on your target. So that's your laceration, barb shot, bloodshed has a higher percentage chance. I don't know if your Fenrir bleed also has a chance as well. I feel like you could actively summon the Dire Beast with a button press, and then to bait the bleeds into it, they could do more damage based on like how many bleeds are active, right? I feel like that would be a more fun way to do it, because yeah, at the moment it's just like now BM's just even easier than it was, and it's kind of missing that extra button press, I feel. But yeah, I mean, it is, I still do enjoy this spec. From the amount that I've played it, I've definitely gotten bored of it. The Stampede goes a long way for helping this spec feel like flavorful and fun. But now there is, because of the way Dire Beast works, there does feel like there's that more, that bigger emphasis on your bleeds, right? And spreading out your barb shots, which then allows for at least some skill expression, right? My pets, now this was a bug, but some of my pets, like my Devil Saws, were spawning in, and they were massive. And it just makes me like fiend for this idea that BM could have like, even Dire Beast is like a big 1 minute cooldown, and you summon this like bigger dinosaur. Yeah, it can be like smaller and play down on other people's screens, but summoning this big Dire Beast that just cleaves down everything and kind of towers over everything, that would look so cool for this spec. And I feel like there's just so much missing potential for Beast Mastery. And then the last thing that I'll complain about for BM is the Killer Instinct change, which is just a fat L. So Killer Instinct used to increase your damage from kill command if the target was below 35% health, I think. So better BM players were able to capitalize on this and find low HP targets in AoE packs, and then kill command them with your Beast Cleave active, which would then make your kill cleave do even more damage. That's gone now, and it literally just buffs up your kill command damage, and this got buffed recently, so it seems like they're trying to sort of force us into playing this. And the BM talent tree is already just completely filled with like passive damage boosts that are just like boring. I get it, they want this spec to be like the beginner friendly, like noob friendly spec, but I just feel like it was in a place where it was starting to feel like a little bit more fleshed out. So BM Hunter, I am going to put in the B tier just behind Dev. Because also, like, I kind of take it for granted these days, but you have the full mobility and like you can do your full rotation on the move as well, right? Like that's always, I feel like, slept on and underrated. Now, next up we have the Marksmanship Hunter. Another spec that has seen amazing changes going into Season 3. So I am loving the explosive shot changes. Now, this is more so relevant for Sentinel, but I'll get onto Dark Ranger in a second because I love the changes for that as well. But it's such a big dub that they built off of the Season 2 tier set for MM. Like, that is the most fun I've ever had with the tier set, I feel like. But basically, your explosive shot now grants lock and load, and your lock and load reduces the cooldown of your explosive shot. So it's just this constant cycle of using explosive shot and getting lock and load procs naturally through your rotation, which that you then fire out, which then reduces your explosive shot cooldown. So you, as MM now, as MM Sentinel, you're basically just blowing the world up. And like, how is that ever not going to be so cool, right? This also makes your volley and salvo window even more fun because that is just extra explosive shots that are being fired out passively through your salvo, which then means that you can start with an explosive shot. So you'd start with a multi-shot, explosive shot, get the free lock and load proc. That reduces the cooldown of your explosive shot. Then you volley salvo, fires out another explosive shot or 2 explosive shots, which then gives you another lock and load proc. So you're instantly getting like 16 seconds off of your cooldown of your explosive shot. If you get lucky and proc another lock and load, you're getting your explosive shot back instantly. So that's 4 explosive shots in like a 2-3 second window. Like, I love explosive shot being like a big source of your AoE damage. I'm a huge fan of that. Also, it makes explosive shot more relevant on single target because now you're getting free lock and load procs from it every single time, which smooths out your focus economy because these these lock and load procs make your aim shot free, and it also gives you more aim shot charges in general. Like if you're out of aim shot charges but you got explosive shot, you then got an instant free aim shot, right? So you're just getting even more aim shot damage out of that, and it makes this button press relevant on single target as well, which is, I think, is super nice. The final thing that I like about Sentinel is they changed it so that when your Lunar Storm comes off of cooldown, it will now instantly reset your rapid fire cooldown. So you're getting much more rapid fires out of that, which is also helping out your focus economy. So huge dubs across the board for Sentinel. Moving on to Dark Ranger, which I think arguably has seen even better changes. Bleak Powder basically explodes your Black Arrow for AoE damage, right? You used to have to activate trick shots for this, so you used to have to hit at least 3 targets with a multi-shot before to activate your Bleak Powder. Yeah, now that's gone, so Bleak Powder is instantly triggered if you Black Arrow a target and there is more than 2 targets present, or maybe it procs off of 2 targets. So now what that means is the Bleak Powder will give you trick shots as well, which means that you can now use your Black Arrow as basically multi-shot in AoE. Once you get those death blow procs, or if the mobs are high HP or low HP, your Black Arrow now becomes your multi-shot, which then also means that after your aim shot, you don't have to use your precise shot stacks, which buffs up the damage of your multi-shot, arcane shot, and Black Arrow. You don't have to use this precise shot stack on the multi-shot to then activate your trick shots for your next Black Arrow. You can just go aim shot into Black Arrow, which then buffs up that Black Arrow for even more damage. Your Black Arrow now also passively applies to all targets, so your aim shot does even more damage through your Phantom Pain proc now. They have cooked with Dark Ranger. It was such a letdown when this spec was first introduced, but my god, have they just made this spec so much better. I love it now. Like, specifically that change to Black Arrow now being able to be used as multi-shot in AoE is amazing. Like, there's just so many benefits to that. Yeah, just W's across the board for Marksmanship Hunter. I am loving this spec. It's definitely, like, it's a shame I played so much MM because I do want to stay clear of it next season. But if I hadn't played so much of it, I would definitely be maining this spec. I am loving it. Okay, back to melee then. We have the Survival Hunter. So the tier set for Sentinel gives you some extra refunds on your bombs. Not necessarily needed, but it does smooth out the rotation. Survival is just all about throwing bombs. I don't know if I'm like the biggest fan of that, but it is nice to just be able to get these resets and throw and just like keep launching bombs, right? This also grants you more explosive shots from your grenade juggler proc, which basically makes your bombs give you a chance to reset the cooldown of explosive shot, and then explosive shot gives you more bombs in turn because it gives you cooldown reduction. The problem with this is, though, and what I don't like about survival, is it just feels like you're always overcapping on all of your abilities, and you're constantly trying to fight from overcapping or sitting on charges of these abilities, and it's this super like high priority system where you're just going to have to waste some cooldown reduction or some cooldown timings from other abilities because you just want to fire bombs, right? It just feels like I'm always trying to fight to keep everything off of cooldown, but it also feels impossible to do that, right? So I don't really see the hype for survival. I also am not a huge fan of the fact that it never really feels like it has a high in its rotation. It's a very consistent spec, and I get that some people do prefer that way of things, but even if it was just like, I guess Fury of the Eagle does feel nice, and it always seems to line up nicely now. And I guess that is the high in your rotation, but I guess because the cooldowns are so short and it's all just like about your bomb damage, it never really feels like you get this big moment of damage, right? Or this high in your rotation. You've had glimpses of that before with like being able to fire off like 3 explosive shots back to back with your old Bombardier talent, but that's since then been changed. But yeah, it's just basically all about bomb spam. And that also feeds into like a problem on single target. I actually really do enjoy Mongoose Bite. I don't know if that's just me, but I do love spamming Mongoose Bite and getting up to those 5 stacks of Mongoose Fury and spamming and weaving in even more Mongoose Bites into that window. And I feel like Mongoose Bite should be your big single target hitter, right? I love that ability. I also do want to be pressing bombs on single target, but there just should be some variance. It shouldn't just all be about bombs. So for me, I think survival might be the first spec that I'm banging in the C tier, unfortunately. Right, so now we have an Arcane Mage. So this spec started off on the PTR as easily one of my favorite specs. The tier set for Spellslinger was making it so that your splinters were granting like crazy amounts of stacks of Arcane Harmony, especially inside your cooldowns. So you were constantly building to these 20 stacks of Arcane Harmony, which the tier set was then making, it was then guaranteeing you a proc of Intuition whenever you hit that 20 stacks of Arcane Harmony, which is really nice because it gives you this like frequent and consistent, fully buffed, like Giga Arcane Barrage that also guarantees a refund of all of your Arcane charges, which then means that you can send these barrages again and just fire barrages and barrages and barrages. These barrages are then going to fire Arcane Orbs, which generates you even more stacks of Arcane Harmony because of the tier set, which then means you get even more Intuition procs, which means even more barrages. It still does play like this, and it still does grant you those guaranteed Intuition procs, which is like a really nice quality of life for the spec, because I hated the change from Aether Vision to Intuition, because Intuition is such a small chance to proc, and it's like one of the only conditions where you can reliably fire a barrage. So getting that much more frequently feels a lot better. It is still a massive improvement, but with the way that Arcane was at the start of PTR, you were able to just fire barrages over and over and constantly buff them up. And like, to be fair, it does still kind of feel like it plays like that during cooldowns. Like, you generate these Harmony stacks very quickly because of all the splinters and other abilities. But outside of cooldowns and even in your mini burn, it's a lot slower. I'm kind of comparing it to like what it was, right? And as a whole, going into Season 3, this tier set is very, very fun because you're just able to fire off these barrages a lot more. So yeah, I am still super enjoying Arcane. Super flashy spec, super bursty spec, which is always good fun as well. I do really miss playing Aether Attunement. I mean, maybe there's a more recent build that includes Aether Attunement with high voltage, where you can use your missiles to generate you stacks of Arcane charges. Really enjoy that gameplay style. And from what I tested, we weren't really playing with that, but I could be wrong on that. Arcane, I am thoroughly enjoying going into Season 3, and I'm gonna put it in the bottom of S tier. Now we have the Fire Mage. So, Stun Fury, the tier set gives you a hypothermia that lasts a freaking lifetime. So you are literally just spamming, unfortunately it is Flame Strike, over and over again, because you're also getting like a mini lush during this hypothermia phase. So you are literally just slamming down flame strikes back to back. It feels giga, and also plays into getting your combust back even quicker because you're getting even more crits. And then with Unleashed Inferno, I mean, actually, Unleashed Inferno wouldn't affect that, right? But Kindling means that you get your combust back even quicker than before. Like when you're playing Sun Fury with Unleashed Inferno and Kindling, your combust is literally on like a 30-second cooldown. It's ridiculous. You always have damage because of that. And it's always like a super fast and fun, engaging playstyle. Sometimes it does get a little bit too much, but I mean, I do have a blast when I'm playing this spec. Because it's Flame Strike though, it has made me realize that I do miss playing Ignite Fire Mage. Flame Strike is similar to, I feel like, BM Hunter, where it just feels like quite uninvolved because you're just kind of like targeting the floor. And it's also quite hard. I guess it's kind of a skill issue, but it just feels like finicky and clunky when you need to like move, because a lot of people move with their like mouse buttons, right? Myself included. So to have to like kind of position my cursor like under the mobs as I'm like moving my character, if I need to move out of a mechanic or something like that, does not feel great. And I definitely do prefer Ignite and just building up this fatty Ignite on the target. I would rather play Pyro Fire Mage instead, but I don't really get that choice. I don't know if that is still the case for Frostfire Fire, but I have played a lot of Frostfire Fire on the PTR, more so before it got like kind of gutted a bit recently. And I have been loving it. Like the amount of Comet Storms that you're proccing from playing also Firefall, you're getting even more Meteors, which then proc even more Comet Storms. You're also playing Sun King's Blessing, which is again something that I realized that I missed with Fire Mage. For whatever reason, it just tickles me hard casting a big old Pyro, especially on single target, but obviously this does also work for Ignite Fire Mage as well. But I really enjoy Sun King's Blessing. It means that you always have like mini bouts of combustion as well. So your damage profile is much more consistent. And also with Frostfire, you'll get like with these pyros that you're firing out, you're also proccing these glacial spikes, which is giving you even more priority damage. But I do wish that the glacial spike was like a guaranteed proc after every single hard-casted SKB pyro. But yeah, I feel like that's all I've really got to say for Fire. It definitely has slowed down in recent times. There's a few moments during your combustion now where you actually do have to Scorch, and I don't necessarily mind that. I feel like I prefer pressing Scorch to Phoenix Flames, to be honest. I don't know, is that weird? But having a super good time on Fire in Season 3, so I'm definitely going to put this in the A+ tier. It probably would be S if both specs were Ignite Fire Mage. So probably my least favorite of the Mage specs is the Frost Mage. Now that's not to say that I don't like it. I always do enjoy Frost Mage, and I have been enjoying it on the PTR. I always enjoy Frostfire. I do have one slight qualm with it, but we'll get to that. But it is sick that with Frostfire Frost Mage, you proc these Pyroblasts every time you Glacial Spike, but with Splitting Ice, it also makes your Pyroblast cleave onto another target. I just think that looks unreal and like it's so flavorful for the spec. I feel like Blizzard did crush Frostfire. I mean, shock, it's Mage, right? But in terms of fantasy and like thematics, Frostfire is so sick. But yeah, for the problem that I have with Frostfire is it does often mean that you're playing Death's Chill. Death's Chill basically means that your Frostfire or your Frostfire Bolt builds up your spell damage and it cleaves on like 3 targets. So what I don't like about this is in AoE, you basically just do nothing for the first 5 to 6 globals of your AoE rotation because you're just building up these Frostfire or these Death's Chill stacks by spamming Frostfire Bolt over and over. It is helped by the fact that Frostfire Bolt becomes instant cast and does like big damage. But I don't know, I feel like it would feel a lot better if you were guaranteed 2 stacks of Frostfire, of an instant Frostfire Bolt when you entered Icy Veins. But I'm just not, like, it just feels like you're AFK for like the first part of like any pool where you're popping Icy Veins. And like if there's lots of smallies, like all these mobs are dead by the time you actually get into your rotation. But once you're in the rotation, again, you're calling down these Comet Storms, which are proccing these huge meteors that do like a lot of your overall damage. And they're coming so frequently with cooldown reduction, like across the board pretty much. Really like that Blizzard is not just a cooldown reduction button anymore and it actually does big damage itself. That's a really nice change for Frost Mage that was made in going into Season 2, I think. But like I've always enjoyed Frost Mage's like kind of gameplay loop, regardless of what kind of damage scenario it is, whether it's single target, AoE, cleave. So Frost Mage I am enjoying nonetheless though. I'm going to put Frost Mage in the A tier. I think I do have a better time on Unholy at the moment. Right, okay, next we have the Windwalker Monk. So the tier set, let's talk about Conduit first. So the tier set is giving you lots and lots of Fist of Fury reduction and a quicker channel speed as well. So this, again, I'm going to contradict myself here. This is always welcome. However, I don't know if this was a PTR thing, but a lot of the time it felt like I couldn't get my Whirling Dragon Punch off, and this is easily the highlight button press of my rotation. And I just wasn't able to reliably do it. Whether it was both of the abilities coming off of cooldown, that being Rising Sun Kick and Fist of Fury, or either one of them, because they come back so quick because of these benefits you get from Conduit and also your tier set, it just felt so hard to weave in sometimes. Now, I have heard that apparently, maybe because of this, Whirling Dragon Punch just is not a high priority button when you're playing Conduit, but that is no bueno. I want to press this ability. It's such a satisfying button press, and it just feels like I could never get it off. I also don't like for the tier set that it's attached to Slicing Winds. I don't like Slicing Winds as a button at all. That shit should have stayed in Plunderstorm. And it's kind of like you're forced into it because your whole tier set revolves around it. Like, I feel like it could have easily have been something else. Maybe even Strike of the Windlord. I mean, I don't even really like Strike of the Windlord. I am normally a huge fan of Windwalker. Like, I always rave about this spec. It was one of my favorites coming into the War Within. But right now, mainly because of the tier sets going into Season 3, it's a shame, but I'm just not so much of a fan of it. With your Shadow Pan, it places a huge emphasis on never overcapping energy, which almost feels impossible between not overcapping energy, not overcapping chi, and not overcapping on any abilities that are relevant to your scenario. Now, I am a sort of at fault here because I didn't realize that Spinning Crane Kick also consumed energy. But with the way that I was playing, like, it just felt like your highest priority was always to not overcap on energy, and the buttons to consume that energy with, you don't really want to press. Like, Spinning Crane Kick, sure, in AoE, but like single target Tiger Palm, like, it doesn't feel that good of an ability, right? I guess it's making it more impactful, but it's not something that I want to press. Yeah, I don't like where Windwalker is at right now, and it is unfortunately because of the tier set. I don't know, I definitely haven't tested this spec as much as I have tested other specs, but I think that is just because normally I can, even if I'm not playing the spec correctly, I can understand how I'm meant to be playing the spec, and I can sort of tell if I will enjoy it, but it's just not really for me right now, which I don't like saying, because I love hit combo, I love always using a different ability, I love how the abilities feel, but the tier sets are just kind of ruining it for me right now. So I'm going to put Windwalker down in C. Might be a hot take, I'm sorry. Okay, moving on to a banger spec then, we have the Retribution Paladin. Now, it seems no matter how hard I try to dislike this spec, because I just think Paladin is cringe in general, and Rets are also cringe. Sorry, Rets. It seems like no matter how hard I try, this spec just is so fun, man. I love it. So the tier set, I've only played Templar, and that's all I need to play, because the tier set is just like Hammer of Light goodness. Basically, when you use your Hammer of Light, you can use another one straight after it. So you're slamming 2 Hammers of Light back to back. One of the best button presses in the game. It's up there with like your Tempest. I mean, I don't really care for like hammers or maces or, like I said, Paladin in general, but my god, it feels like you are crushing the earth when you press that button. So you're getting another use of that. And then also, if you're lucky and it lines up, you can then get a third use of it from your Light's Deliverance procs if they do line up. So pressing 3 Hammers of Light back to back, it feels illegal. It is so juicy when you press that. In between that, every other button press feels impactful. Your cooldowns feel impactful even though they're on a short cooldown, which I think Blizzard have done a really good job of, because normally if a cooldown's shorter, like for example Survival Hunter, it doesn't feel that impactful. But every time, even on your 30-second cooldowns, these cooldowns feel so impactful for Ret. Like, they just beef up your gameplay and damage so much. The only thing that contradicts that is Divine Hammer. They did nerf Divine Hammer to a 2-minute cooldown. Now, I think this has some interactions with Templar that I don't really understand, but I feel like even if I didn't understand it, I feel like I would feel it if that Divine Hammer felt nice and felt like a fun cooldown to use, which I think it should. It should feel more impactful if its cooldown's been nerfed. Maybe that's just because of the damage that it brings through Empyrean Hammers, I don't know. But I press this button and I forget that it's rolling. It doesn't feel like Breath of Sindragosa at all. I'm just not really a fan of this ability, to be honest. And I feel like it does have scope to be a fun little like damage window. Other things that I don't enjoy, Hammer of Wrath hitting like a wet noodle. I would enjoy pressing Hammer of Wrath as a higher priority on single target. Don't care to press it in AoE, of course, but I definitely want to be pressing this in single target to like kind of spice up my single target rotation a bit. But you do sort of get that from your Divine Storm procs as well. So that is nice because you even use these free Divine Storm procs on single target. So that spices that up a little bit. And also just getting Divine Storm procs, whether it's Divine Purpose procs, which makes your Divine Storm free in AoE, or getting refunds, or getting the free Divine Storms that I'm talking about that you also use for single target. It feels like you can just mash these finishes back to back in AoE, and like with the visual feedback that you get from that as well, it just feels super, super nice. So Ret for me is a banger spec going into the season 3, and I am going to put Ret. It actually pains me to put it in S tier, but like I just have too good of a time on it to deny it. Next up, Shadow Priest then. So this got like a slight rework to some of its talents, but the spec at its core still plays pretty much exactly the same after the rework. Been playing a lot of Void Weaver on the PTR. It has been nerfed quite a bit and Archon's been buffed quite a bit, so Archon might be better now, I don't know. But Void Weaver is super fun. The tier set is very, very fun. Basically, you're just, it's feeding all of this extra damage and size into your Entropic Rift. So by the end of your Entropic Rift window, your Entropic Rift is bloody humongous, which looks unreal. And then it explodes for huge damage, which then buffs up your next Void Torrent. And it all just plays into each other super nicely. Places a lot of emphasis on Void Blast as well, which is a super fun button press. So yeah, thoroughly enjoying Void Weaver. Now they did introduce a new talent called Void Volley, which your Void Torrent will turn into a Void Volley after it's pressed. And to me, this button feels a little bit underwhelming, unfortunately. When I heard of it, I was like, wow, that sounds unreal. Like, imagine if you're just like, imagine if this is like an AoE Void Torrent or something like that. I don't know. Maybe my hopes were too high. This ability is nice to press like on the move. It's nice for insanity generation. It spawns a tentacle as well, so it has nice interactions there. And also does like decent damage itself through Psychic Link. But I feel like what would make this button, like what would make me want to press this button is if it did refresh the dots or extend the dot duration that you have on your current target. Maybe I'm being too harsh, but I do feel like there's room for improvement with Void Volley. The animation's pretty sick, but to touch on the dots do feel, I think this is because I've been playing Dark Ascension, but the dots don't feel like they last as long. But that doesn't really matter so much because now you have 2 charges of Shadow Crash. Don't really know when this was introduced, but an amazing change. Especially if you're pugging out there, like you know how bad it feels if you miss your Shadow Crash, or if you Shadow Crash like 3 mobs and then your tank pulls another 5 or something like that. This just kind of bridges that gap super nicely. There's a lot of times where it's like not even really your fault, right? So I think for the wider player base, having 2 charges of Shadow Crash is exactly what Shadow Priest needed. But yeah, I am really enjoying Shadow Priest on the PTR. Void Weaver like always has damage. You basically got your cooldowns on like a 30-second cooldown. Feels super impactful as well, and the visuals are amazing for this spec. Shadow Priest, I am gonna put in the A tier. I haven't played too much Archon. I don't know how Archon's feeling. I'm really not that gassed or hyped about pressing Halo, but I do feel like overall I kind of prefer the way that Archon plays because it's more of an emphasis on like your Psychic Link damage and your dots. Don't get me wrong, obviously Psychic Link's still a huge part of Void Weaver, but a lot of it is your Entropic Rift damage and like emphasis on Void Blast, right? Like I also enjoy channeling Mind Flays and Mind Blasts. Okay, another spec that I haven't played too much of, then we've got the Assassination Rogue. Now, I don't want to rank this spec too harshly because I feel like, although I haven't played enough of it and maybe it will grow more on me as I play it more, I just feel like this kind of spec just isn't for me. I enjoy more bursty playstyles. If you enjoy a more like spinning plates playstyle, spreading dots and stuff like that, and keeping up like maintenance buffs and such, you'll probably really enjoy Assassination Rogue. So I'm not going to let my opinion affect this too much because I don't want to put you guys off. I'm just making it very clear that like I'm not huge on like the kind of dot and maintenance gameplay. That being said, I have enjoyed the little time that I've played of it. It might be something to do with the fact that the damage is just busted right now. But the tier set is making Shiv feel much more impactful of a button press. They also extended the duration of Shiv, so that makes it much more forgiving to play around. Have we always had 2 charges of Shiv? I don't know. Or maybe that's a talent. I'm not sure. So yeah, that's making the spec easier. Like, I am also aware that the spec is quite widely known as like an easier spec, and I don't think it's that easy, but that's just going to be time in the game, right? I have, however, now I think I've been playing like the optimal build. I might be wrong. I feel like with Assassination, there's always different builds that you can play. I would always want to play the optimal one, and the one that I've been playing didn't have improved garrote, so I can't spread my garrotes in my opener, which makes the opener feel so much more clunky to me. Because like I want to open with like double garrote and double rupture when I'm playing with serrated bone spike, right? Because then I'll rupture, get refund, rupture again, and that would be spread out to loads of different targets with indiscriminate carnage. Instead, you're only allowed to get one garrote off in your opener, which kind of slows down that opener and doesn't make it feel as nice. So wasn't a fan of that. And also I was playing without 2 charges of Vanish. I'd much rather play with 2 charges of Vanish. Maybe this is like me being a noob, but it allows me to get more value out of my indiscriminate carnage and spread more of those garrotes and ruptures, which then means that I don't have to like kind of manually, singularly maintain my ruptures and tab target through mobs to apply ruptures to get my scent of blood up, right? But like in saying all this, I do think that I could enjoy Assassination. I just know that like this kind of spec is not my cup of tea. So I am going to put Assassination in the B tier. I think I'll put it there, to be honest. Now, you guys might be surprised and think that's like quite a high ranking, but I can see the potential with this spec. Now, another surprise, because I normally love playing this spec. This is the Outlaw Rogue, and this spec is by far and away, to me at least, the worst feeling spec on PTR. It's absolute dog shit. I would never ever recommend it to a friend. And that is coming from somebody who normally loves this spec. Like, I normally really enjoy like the fast-pacedness of this spec, the Vanish window. I still enjoy the Vanish windows, but going into Season 3, for some reason, you're still playing Keep It Rolling, even though you only literally ever roll 2 buffs, so you never have a reason to keep it rolling. I personally much prefer playing Hidden Opportunity, because I feel like, especially with Count the Odds, you get more, you get extra, much more frequent extra buffs, right? And then you're quite often sitting at like 4 or 5 buffs, and that's where Outlaw really feels like it's meant to feel, right? Feels like you hit the jackpot or found your treasure as a pirate. I don't care for the pirate fantasy either. But yeah, this spec on, like, from what I tested on PTR, I don't know if it's just me, but I literally, like, when playing the spec, had to check if I was in the right talents, if I had like an intellect weapon on, if I had the right gear, if I was bugged. Like, I didn't know what it was, but it just felt like I was constantly spamming Sinister Strike, getting like 1 or 2 combo points, never proccing my free pistol shot, which fills up my combo point bar. So it was just waiting for my energy to regen. Adrenaline Rush is insanely punishing. If you don't have like 80+% uptime on your Adrenaline Rush, which is sometimes out of your control, then you literally feel like you're playing a classic rogue just spamming Sinister Strike. Not even spamming, because you can't press it enough to call it spamming. Basically, I just want to see more buffs, especially when I'm playing Keep It Rolling. Like, I want to be able to constantly roll off these buffs and keep them up for a longer time, but like sometimes I'm proccing like Grand Melee by itself, and sometimes I'm like, then I'm proccing like 2 rolls back to back to back, and it just feels like ass, man. Killing Spree, however, was changed for the better. They changed this so now you're just like firing your pistol shot. It seems like it's kind of inspired from like, I guess, Misfortune from League, I don't know. But you're just like barraging your pistol over the duration. It refills your combo points and also refills your energy, which feels like you're kind of the only reason that you're using it. It doesn't seem like it does a lot of damage. I feel like this ability should maybe not even benefit from Restless Blades, but should be on like a minute or minute and a half cooldown, and it's this AoE nuke that by the end of the run, it's like one of your top damage sources. Like, I think that would be so sick. Right now, it just kind of feels like you're pressing it to like regenerate energy and combo points. It feels like such a non-button press. The animation is sick, and I love what they did with the rework to it, but I just want it to be doing more damage and feel more impactful when I press it. Outlaw's not in a good spot at the moment. I feel like I'm not the only person saying that. It's fine damage-wise, but this is based on fun, and I have just not been enjoying my time on it at all. It's just like Sinister Strike Simulator, pretty much. And like Dispatch that like basically tickles the mobs. I do enjoy the crack shot windows, especially with the ace up your sleeve procs, but yeah, it's just not enough for me. So Outlaw's going in the D tier. Sorry. Probably my favorite, yeah, definitely my favorite of the rogue specs then is the Subtlety Rogue. I've been testing out a lot of Trickster on the PTR, and I really like Trickster because I feel like it feeds kind of into everything that the sub rogue is known for, with like funnel and prio damage, because in up to like 7 or 8 targets, or maybe even more now, you're going to use basically your single target abilities, so your Shadow Strikes, Backstabs, and Eviscerates, because they're going to proc a Nimble Flurry AoE around you, which is most of your damage. Don't know if it's just me, but I really enjoy like feeding damage into a priority target at the same time as like passively doing AoE or proccing in some way, some form of AoE. Trix is also super nice as well because of the coup de grace from the tier set that you get back to back. You use coup de grace and then you get to use it another time within like 4 seconds. This feels specifically nice as sub, but I do think like an improvement to be made on this. I feel like the coup de grace, the first one, could refund your combo points, because sometimes it is difficult with your Dance Macabre talent to get 2 coup de grace and a sec tech all within the Shadow Dance window. Yeah, I don't know. It might have been like a PTR lag type thing, but sometimes I was struggling to get that all inside the same Shadow Dance window. But I do definitely enjoy the coup de grace proc back to back. But yeah, these dance windows are still super fun. Like weaving everything. Now that I understand Dance Macabre as well, I definitely enjoy that talent, and firing off these meaty sec techs inside those windows for huge damage is like super satisfying. I like the gameplay loop of sub and like the Shadow Dance windows has always really appealed to me. I've always really enjoyed it. I love the gameplay outside of your dance windows as well. Like it does feel like you're tickling the mobs. I know maybe it's an unpopular opinion, but I do enjoy spreading ruptures outside of my dance windows, because it's kind of just like this maintenance like sort of down phase to get this damage ticking while you go into your next like super bursty window, right? I do think Rupture belongs to Assassination, and it should instead be like a Gloom or Nightblade for the sub rogue to be spreading around. But I just really like, as a whole, love like the super bursty phases, like Shadow Blades is insane burst. Flagellation still needs to go. Such a non-button press that just clogs up your opener. But yeah, loving these bursty windows into these like down phases where you're doing a bit of maintenance, applying bleeds, or like what should be a shadow dot onto the mob for the fantasy and thematics of the spec. But yeah, I've just really enjoyed Subtlety on the PTR. So sub for me is going to go into the top of the A tier, I think. Elemental Shaman, I've been loving Elemental Shaman. This is definitely a potential main for me for Season 3. The Stormbringer tier set, much like Enhanced that we'll get on to after, it just plays into everything that these specs like are about and what make them so fun. Getting more Tempest is always going to be welcome. Getting more Ascendance procs, like Ascendance, you just feel like an absolute god when you're in that cooldown. Whether you're proccing it from the actual cooldown itself, DRE, or even the tier set procs as well. You're just constantly firing out all of these overloads. It's guaranteeing you Tempest and like firing out all these lava bursts as you go into it. Like you just feel like an absolute like Ascendant. So yeah, the fact that it's like kind of doubling down on this, like I'm just in love with it at the moment, and you might see me on it in Season 3. I would probably prefer playing Earthshock. I don't mind Ellie Blast and single target, and especially during Ascendance if you get like some huge overload procs with it. But when you're playing Echoes, I'm not a fan of Echoes, but Echoes would feel so much better in AoE if it was Earthshock. Basically, you just need to alternate between your Ellie Blast and your Earthquake to buff up your Earthquake in AoE. But Ellie Blast is a long cast time, Earthshock is instant. So being able to fire off an Earthshock quickly straight into an Earthquake after would feel infinitely better. But I mean, also just like kind of get rid of Echoes of the Great Sundering and let me fully enjoy my Aftershock procs where I'm refunded the Maelstrom that I've spent and just slam down like 7 Earthquakes back to back. I would love that. The only other thing that I want to touch on that I'm not a huge fan of with Ellie is the fact that it's got like 2 main cooldowns and they also don't sync up. Like just make them sync up, Blizzard. Just make Storm Ellie a 3-minute cooldown if you have to, or make them both the 2-minute cooldown. Don't really care to have 2 big cooldowns in the first place, but the fact that they're never lining up with each other and you have to like sit on one and hold one for the other, it's just like, ugh, gross. But other than that, like this spec is just a good time. Like I can be doing tank damage and I don't care. Like the visual feedback, the audio feedback is enough alone to just carry this spec all the way to the S tier. This spec is going right up there with Havoc. I mean, it could be top. I don't know. I think, yeah. I like the amount of procs. You're just always getting procs on this spec. Like I'm just always pog champing. Like I literally make a pog champ with my face when I'm playing this spec. Like it has to be the top of S tier. So the Shami counterpart then, we have the Enhanced Shaman. Much like I said for Elemental, the Stormbringer tier set better be the play because it just plays into everything that makes these specs so much fun. I feel like Ascendance feels better for Elemental, but Tempest feels better for Enhance. Getting guaranteed procs of Tempest in your Ascendance windows, which deals huge Tempest overload damage, feels incredible. It's got the visual effect. Like, Tempest is definitely one of the best button presses in the game. But also, like, that's not to say Ascendance also makes you feel like a god when you're playing Enhance as well. Because of Thorim's Invocation, you're just constantly, like, chaining out these Chain Lightnings or Lightning Bolts, spamming Storm Strike, which I don't know how they made one button, like, just spamming one button so fun, but they did it. And Storm Strike also has 2 charges now. I don't know when that happened either, but my god, I just love spamming Storm Strike, or I guess Wind Strike during your Ascendance, right? And just seeing these Chain Lightnings just fire and fire and fire. Your Tempest procs, big Tempest damage. Tempest procs so frequently that you don't even need to take your main cooldown Feral Spirits now because it's proccing so many Lightning Wolves for you. So that frees up other talents to have more fun with. I just much prefer this version of Enhanced. Like, the spammy kind of like feel-good whack-a-mole rotation for me is like infinitely more fun than like the spinning of plates with like the old Elementalist build where you'd have to like spread your flame shocks, buff them up with your lava lashes. Not a fan of that, so I'd choose Stormbringer any day of the week. The only thing that I don't like about Enhance is, I mean, it's not I don't like it, I just feel like it's unnecessary, is Primordial Storm. I would personally just rather buff up a Lightning Bolt or a Chain Lightning instead of having my Prim Wave then turn into a Prim Storm. Like, does it look cool? I haven't really noticed it, I don't know, but I just preferred the old way that the old Prim Wave worked out. So yeah, I would probably remove Primstorm if I had the choice. I don't know if there's some like interactions that I don't really understand with Wind Fury. I feel like there might be, but I just don't feel like we need it. So, Enhancement Shaman, we're going into the A+ tier above Fire. Now we have the Affliction Warlock, which unfortunately I think has, like, the problems with this spec has been even more so highlighted because Shadow Priest got 2 charges there we go, of Shadow Crash, and that's exactly what Afflock needs for Vile Taint. It needs 2 charges of Vile Taint, it needs cooldown reduction on Vile Taint, it needs Agony to last much longer for the duration. Any of these things, like, we'll take anything at this point, but they just need to change Vile Taint. It's putting so many people off of this spec, and they just do not seem to care. So, like, that is by far and away the biggest problem with the spec, and that's why it's going to be ranked lower, unfortunately. I'm also not a huge fan of Malefic Rapture, but I definitely can get over it more so than other people can. Like, there's a lot of AF diehards out there that, like, just do not want to touch this spec because of Malefic Rapture alone. I don't mind it because it's like every time you press that button, you know that like your damage is jumping up from like big bursts. But I mean, Legion AF was just the GOAT, right? Like, spam Seed of Corruption in AoE and get that nice, satisfying, big, juicy pop, especially with Sow the Seeds, where it's like 3 Seeds of Corruption. And then on single target and even cleave, use Unstable Affliction as your main spender. Get some priority damage out of that and just feed all of these UAs into each other to build up a fatty UA. That was peak Affliction, and unfortunately it's just kind of gone downhill since Legion. I don't know if it's a balancing issue, I'm not sure. I don't even feel like Affliction really needs an AoE spender or as such. Like, place more emphasis on the dots and just maintaining the dots, but then you need to make them actually hit hard, because AF is meant to be a dot spec, but it just does not feel like a dot spec at all now. It's not all doom and gloom. Like, I do have good times on Affliction, especially after your Soul Rot windows. It feels like you're fighting to overcap on Soul Shards and just spamming Malefic Rapture, and you know, like, just you can feel how bursty you're being during that. I like the extension on dots and like your Dark Glare cooldown. I do enjoy some parts of the spec. I think there should be an AoE drain soul mechanic somewhere baked in. But yeah, AF is just always going to be held back by the Vile Taint issue, the glaring issue at the moment. So Affliction Warlock, I'm also going to place in the C tier behind Windwalker. Next up, Demonology Warlock. Now, this is definitely, in terms of gameplay, my favorite Warlock spec. However, the tier set for both specs is very passive and just bland and kind of boring, which is unfortunate. It does still, unfortunately, feel a bit slow off the mark when you're first in keys and when you're first in fights. It is a very rampy spec, but kind of like once you get going and you get chugging, as long as you don't have like big downtime, then you can like be a burstier spec. I mean, the spec is just so sick. Like the fantasy of it, like summoning Fel Guards, more Fel Guards, Gloom or Charhounds, having this army of imps around you, then buffing them all up with this big old tyrant that deals that makes them deal like insane damage during this, and that being on like a 1 minute cooldown and then having a bigger go on a 2 minute cooldown. I do love the way the spec plays. And then in AoE you can fly all your imps into the mob. Like it's such a comedic sort of button press, but it feels so satisfying to just fling all your imps in for big AoE damage. I do love like pretty much every part of this rotation. This would be higher if the tier set was more fun and engaging, but it is just like extra passive damage basically. So I am going to put Demonology Warlock in at the top of the A tier. Last up then for the Warlock, we have the Destruction Warlock. I don't really know why I spoke so highly of this in terms of fun going into Season 2, because not a whole lot has changed going into Season 3. It's still its very simple and bland self, unfortunately. Spam Rain of Fire in AoE, spam Chaos Bolt and Shadow Burn on single target. I do enjoy Channel Demon Fire, extending your Immolation or Wither and kind of sending that on cooldown to keep them up on the mobs. But apart from that, I feel like it just relies on its like visual feedback to kind of carry this spec and make it fun. It is super flashy, no one can argue with that, especially when you're playing with like Mayhem and being able to fire off 2 Chaos Bolts like quite frequently. I definitely prefer playing Mayhem to Havoc, but outside of that, it's just kind of like boring. It's just very simple and easy, and maybe like that is what it's meant to be, right? And maybe that's where like I'm just not going to mesh well with this spec. But yeah, the tier set, I've played some Diabolist. Diabolist is actually, like, to be fair, I've got to give credit where it's due. Diabolist does spice up the rotation. You get your Ruinations, Infernal Bolts. That does make it, it gives it a bit more variance to the rotation, right? But the tier set's super passive, and the tier set for Hellcooler is even more passive, and it plays into what I already don't like about Destruction, and that being Blackened Soul being like your top damage. I feel like that's such a weird damage source for that to be your top damage. Doesn't really make sense because I enjoy Phantom Pain being your top damage on Marksmanship Hunter, Dark Ranger, but I would much rather see like Rain of Fire at the top of my damage meter, like at the end of the dungeon, alongside like your Infernal, I guess. And then Blackened Soul can be like there. I don't want it to be like by far and away the top damage source for my Destro Lock, right? It's not for me going into Season 3, unfortunately. I am going to place Destruction just behind Boomy in the B tier. Yeah, I mean, it does have its moments. Like, don't get me wrong. I mean, any spec is fun in mass AoE, right? Except Fury Warrior, but we'll get onto that. But yeah, I guess Destruction is fun in mass AoE, and it is flashy. Like seeing that, like literally, like all of those, especially like the green meteors coming down, right, from your Rain of Fire, pretty sick. But it's not enough for me. I need something more. So the last two then, we have the infamous warrior specs that are very hard done by at the moment. Arms needs some loving. Still, none of its cooldowns are lining up with each other at all, which feels awful. You're just meant to send them on cooldown basically, but none of them line up with each other, so none of them are buffing each other's damage, which is just like, that's not what you want your cooldowns to be, right? You want to squeeze them all into this like huge damage bursty window. But instead with arms, you're just like sending one here, sending one there. It feels all just very clunky and horrible. Avatar needs to be a shorter cooldown. I don't think it's reduced by anger management currently, is it? But like you do feel like a colossal titan when you're inside Avatar, especially when you've got your Demolish, when you're playing Colossus. Your Demolish is... It's got to be up there with one of the most satisfying button presses in the game, as long as you don't die from it or as long as the mobs don't run away. But it fits the arms fantasy perfectly. I really cannot fault this ability. And like especially when you're in Avatar, and even after you're demolished, when you're in Avatar, you just feel like this like tyrant just like cleaving everything down. Speaking of cleave is... I actually do really enjoy spamming cleave in AoE, especially with like all the resets. Mortal Strike's fun in single target. And then, like, outside of cleaving in AoE, it feels like a lot of your damage, if you're not playing Dreadnought, a lot of your damage is just, like, single target or, like, cleaved with Sweeping Strikes. I feel like there's room there. Like, I know Sweeping Strikes is iconic, but I feel like there's room for Sweeping Strikes to work like Blade Flurry does for Outlaw Rogue, where, like, with the Precise Cuts talent, where, like, Sweeping Strikes could allow your abilities to hit, like, let's say, even like, let's say 5 targets, but then the lower amount of targets that are present, your abilities cleave for higher damage, if that makes sense. I feel like there's just a lot of room with arms. I feel like they just don't give a shit about warrior at all. But like I can have fun on this spec. It's just the cooldown issue is the main issue. So I'm going to put arms at the top of C, I think. And then finally, for the fun tier list, we have the Fury Warrior. I do actually still really enjoy Fury. Like, outside of, we're trying to forget here how damn bad Fury is with its 5 target cap, which does also, like, it hurts its performance, but it does also hurt its fun aspect as well. Like, when I'm on an Outlaw Rogue and I'm capped to 8 targets, I feel like there's not that many pulls where, like, you're really going over by that much, and I feel like I'm hitting the majority of the pack with Outlaw. I don't really notice it. But Fury, it's kind of wild that it's still hard capped pretty much at 5 total targets. It does decent damage to compensate for that, but it's just not good feeling and like knowing that you're only cleaving down like a fraction of the pack, right? Like, that's just not a nice feeling. But outside of this target cap, I do still enjoy like the flow of this spec. It's super fast paced and bursty. It's always getting its cooldowns back, and you're always just like constantly dumping these rampages that are cleaving. So I do enjoy and like have a good time on the spec, especially with Mountain Thane. I think Mountain Thane kind of adds the much needed visuals that Fury or Warrior in general needs. And when you press Thunderblast, like, to be fair, Thunderblast has got to be one of the best feeling button presses in the game, in my opinion. It does feel super meaty when you press that. And then with Mountain Thane as well, you also get these Bloodthirst resets where you can press Bloodthirst like 3 times back to back, which feels really nice. I think it also helps that the button actually lights up, but that's probably just me being small brain and needing that dopamine hit. But I do enjoy that part of the gameplay as well. But yeah, unfortunately for Fury, I think that the target cap is also just highlighted by the dungeon pool that we have in Season 3 as well. There's so much mass AoE, and you're just, it's not going to feel good knowing that you're like barely touching the sides of the pack, right? So the Fury Warrior, I do enjoy it more than Arms, and I am going to put it in the B tier. I'm going to put the Fury Warrior, you know what? It's going to go quite high in the B tier, actually. So that is my fun tier list for Season 3, ranking all of the DPS specs against each other in terms of fun, like based on their gameplay and rotation. We've got Elemental at the top alongside Havoc, Hunter. I feel like Ret and Frost and Arcane are a little bit lower than these 3. Like, I'm really enjoying these 3. And then by far and away, we have Outlaw at the bottom. This spec needs God. It feels awful right now on the PTR. Hopefully that's not just me, but yeah, also obviously this is subjective, so you guys might have different opinions to that, and you might enjoy Outlaw. You might love spamming Sinister Strike for a whole key and never rolling more than 2 buffs. I don't know.